Hello, welcome back to another video. RMS has a new product in their line called the Hydra Setting Powder. Seems like they're really just going hand with the Hydra products, the Hydra Blush, Hydra Bronzer, Hydra Highlight, Hydra Powder. I don't know what's next. What do you think would be next? But I'm not mad at it because I do love all the rest of the Hydra products. So we're going to be testing this new Hydra Powder today. I have the lightest shade Light. We're going to see if it's too dark for pale skin. Also going to be doing a comparison to the original Powder to see if it's really truly something different or if they're just sort of rebranding it. We're going to see all the details you need to know are in this video. So without further ado, let's get started. If you're not already subscribed, I'd love to have you, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it at any point. And if you need any other RMS reviews, I do have like a full playlist of basically all of their products that I reviewed, so you know what's good, what's not. It will be linked, but let's watch this video first. Let's get started. Okay, Miss Hydra Powder. Let's see what she's all about. This is $42, a little bit more expensive than I was expecting, but it is a talc-free powder, so I would understand that because usually talc is like the cheapest thing to make powder out of, and they're purposely not using that. So let's see details. It says that it's a long-wearing talc-free skincare infused loose setting powder with 3 sheer soft focus shades. It says it's weightless, oil absorbing powder, minimizes the appearance of pores, blurs imperfections, sets makeup, and delicately hydrates for a natural smooth filter effect on the skin. Ultra fine light reflecting formula has a silky texture that won't cake or settle into fine lines, providing the finishing touch for filter-like skin with 0 flashback. Okay, that's interesting because I did do a flashback test with this later in the video. Powered by Herbal Hydrate, an innovative complex of water-soluble plant-derived actives and vegetable capsules, it allows for moisturizing benefits in a powder. Also very interesting. I don't think I've ever seen like a skincare infused powder before. Before we get into this application, I have the rest of my makeup on, but of course we're going to need some concealer. I'm going to be using this Surratt concealer because it is really light, and I'm definitely curious to test if this will deepen my face, especially a light under eye concealer, because being very fair, it's definitely a criteria of mine is I don't like a powder that's going to make things darker if I, match everything to the rest of my face. So I'm going to use a little bit of this. This is the shade 1. I also did the rest of my makeup pretty dewy so we could really test sort of the oil controlling properties and just the mattifying abilities of this powder, because that's usually what I'm looking for in a powder, right? Is it going to set down my makeup without looking cakey and control oils? For my foundation, I'm using the About Face Performer Foundation, one I'm really familiar with and how it wears, so I can really judge what is the powder and not just, trying it on a new foundation. So you should also be able to see that that concealer is nice and bright, so when we go ahead and apply the powder, we'll see if any sort of darkening happens. I haven't even opened this or swatched it yet, so I'm really curious. This is definitely a much larger size compared to the original Powder. It honestly looks like a little baby powder compared to this one. This is 0.35 ounces and this one is 0.32 ounces, which is actually really interesting that there's only a little bit more in here. It's just more packaging basically. I think also this is a little bit less dense, so you can sort of, it looks smaller than this. I don't know if that checks out. You know what I'm trying to say? Ooh, okay, there is a sponge on the top here. I was not expecting that. I don't know why. Okay, you get a nice little sponge there. It does have a closable top, so that would also explain the size, that it's going to be closable. Oh, that's kind of cool. It has their logo on it, so when you open it up, it kind of like imprints it on the powder. Although these kinds of packagings are a little bit more bulky if you plan on traveling with it or like you move around with your makeup bag, might be nice to have. I like to give the best chance to all the powders that I try. So with my concealer, I just like to go in with my finger. This will smooth out any creasing or settling that happened with my concealer. So we're really just going to be testing the powder and how it works with the concealer, not necessarily, the concealer itself. So I just like to really go in. I always go with the sides of my nose too and the smile lines. Anywhere you get cakey or just like extra lines, it's a really good practice because it just removes any extra product. And once everything is looking nice and smooth, let me go in. I'm gonna use a Real Techniques setting brush. This is just their under eye setting brush. Color wise, I'm a little bit worried about this, but we will see. I'm just gonna take a little bit on the brush and then make sure it's worked in. And then I'm just going to pat this on the under eye. Okay, doesn't seem too dark right off the bat. Just dipping into a little bit more. Just gonna focus on the under eyes now and we'll see how that is looking texture wise. Okay, now I'm definitely noticing that there is some darkening going on between this side and this side. You can tell that it did just darken that under eye a slight bit. Not a ton. I would kind of compare it to the Laura Mercier powder where it does just give you a little bit of a yellow tint. I wish it was truly translucent, but you know, I can work with it. Actually really interesting. I feel like I used quite a lot of powder like I went back in. I feel like it doesn't like fully set down. I mean, like it feels set, but it like took quite a lot to actually truly like mattify and take all of the shine away from my under eye. I don't know, that's just like a really interesting property for a powder. But I think there is also a pro to that because it looks really natural and non-drying. So if you do have more dry under eyes or dry skin, that could be something that you really like. Because even though I've added more product on, it doesn't look as drying, especially not compared to the unpowder, which is more of a slightly drying, like truly mattifying powder. This is just giving me a nice soft focus look. Let me go ahead and do this under eye. I'm curious if I use more under this eye, if it's going to be more matte. I'm also going to take the extra because I used a lot on the sides of my nose, into the smile lines, and also on the chin. It's really interesting. I'm actually liking the look of it when I used a little bit more on this side, and I do notice that happens with some powders because if you really load a brush full of powder, it doesn't really give the chance to the brush to like touch the concealer and maybe move it around. It's just like straight on powder, and I don't feel like it looks too powdery or too dry. Even on the sides of my nose, that can be like a textured area. I do have some dry skin on my nose currently, and I don't feel like it like emphasized texture or anything, and now it's giving me a bit more of the mattifying effect that I was looking for. I do want to give a chance to this little sponge too, so I'm going to put some of that powder in the lid and then make sure it's coated on the sponge. Then let's go ahead and press this into the forehead. I think this kind of application for powder is really nice if you're looking not to disturb your makeup. Just make sure that there is even coating of powder because it can pick up your foundation if this isn't like fully dry with powder. It also said you could use a fluffy brush for the rest of the face, so I'm going to use the RMS B60B brush, which is this big fluffy one. It's usually used for bronzer, but let's test it out. Like I mentioned, I did use cream products just to see how this would work over top of them, and a liquid highlight. Looks like it set down nicely. Yeah, feeling wise, this feels very nice and lightweight. Definitely doesn't feel overly drying, or definitely doesn't look cakey either. Like it's nice and smooth. Compared to the powder that I usually use, I am noticing on this side where I only use like a regular amount of product, I did quite a bit over here. Like my concealer doesn't seem to be like fully set. It is creasing a little bit more than it would usually. Yeah, I don't know, it just doesn't necessarily like look fully set to me, which I'm not super surprised because this powder formulation is really interesting with those added oils and just things to moisturize your skin, but it also says it's oil absorbing. So here's what it's looking like a little bit closer. As you can tell, it's giving me this nice smoothing effect. I do agree that it looks nice and smooth. It feels light. The only like negatives I'm noticing now is that it is a slightly darker color than my foundation was in my under eye, so it did tint it a little bit darker. And also this side where I didn't use quite as much product, it's not like it's just already creasing a little bit more than it usually would. But we will see as the day goes on how that progresses compared to this side, and also just oil wise what we're going to be working with, if it's going to control oil. I am curious to see if it does, because it does have oils in it, but it's also oil controlling. It's kind of confused, but we'll see what happens. Just putting a little bit of a lip on now. This is from Moira. I really like this. Their Mauve Dream. I think it's one of their like creamy lipsticks. It's really pretty mauve. And then let's go in with one of their Hydra blushes. This is the French Rosé shade. I did already have a little bit of a cream blush on, but I feel like could amp it up even more. Very curious to see how it's going to end up wearing. It is 1:12. I will be pretty active today, so I'll be sweating. My oils will be coming through. We'll see how it really performs in that aspect. Then just for a quick comparison between the unpowder and this new powder, what is this one called? The Hydra Setting Powder. I would say the name is pretty true with this. This one feels a lot more drying, which I don't personally mind if I'm a little bit more oily, but if you found this one just a little bit too dry for you, you might end up liking the Hydra Powder a lot better as long as the shade isn't going to bother you. This one does have a lot more hydrating and moisturizing ingredients, whereas this powder is super simple. It's just silica and mica, whereas the Hydra setting powder is mica, silica, squalane, and then we have all the rest of those moisturizing ingredients and the coloring. So I know that because this has silica in it, it definitely gives you flashback. Let's see with this powder if we're gonna get a lot of flashback. Okay, that's actually pretty surprising. There's actually no flashback in this picture. So there wasn't flashback in that picture. It doesn't necessarily mean it's never gonna give you flashback. I would test it if you plan on doing flash photography. I also am very fair, so I don't know how that affects it. And then just texture wise between these two powders, just between my fingers, the original unpowder feels like very chalky almost, like it's not really the best texture to feel. That's what makes it super mattifying though. But with the new Hydra powder, it's feeling a little bit more creamy, and I do feel like it gives me more of a smoothing effect than the unpowder. This one can emphasize dryness a little bit more, so maybe a new improved unpowder. I'll pop in some natural lighting shots as well to show you what it's looking like. I think it looks beautiful. Like I said, we'll see how it wears. I will see you at the end of the night with the update. All right, it's the end of the night. It's 10:24, so I have been wearing this for a very long time and I was very active, but there was some change of plans. I did actually end up redoing my makeup because after I actually looked up close with that foundation and powder on, it was just like not sitting well at all. Getting like very just like my under eyes like didn't feel set and they were very creasy. I was like, maybe I just have too much foundation, I used too much product. So I just went in with a tinted sunscreen, this Iris&Romeo one, which is what I have on now, and then I reset it. So I do have the little videos of what this looked like at first. So now it's the checkup with this as the wear. I kind of had a similar issue with it under my eyes. I also changed the concealer to my Haus Labs concealer, which I never have a problem with creasing, and it just didn't set. Like I can set that concealer and it won't crease on me. It just doesn't seem to do a very good job at actually setting concealer. So when I do the close-up, you'll see my under eyes are creased. So in the aspect of it being an under eye powder, it's going to be a thumbs down for me. It just, I feel like because it has those hydrating, moisturizing ingredients, it just did not set my under eyes the way that works for me. I have very finicky under eyes, like it just doesn't work. It's too, I think, hydrating, like unfortunately. If you have very dry under eyes, maybe, but if you have problems with creasing, would not recommend for under the eyes. For the rest of the makeup though, I feel like it did work pretty well at controlling my oil, probably for around 8 hours like it did claim to. But I also did notice it getting like a little bit bunched up around my chin, even with just that light layer of sunscreen. For the shade, I don't think it was too drastic of a change on my skin. It did like visibly tint my skin slightly darker though. So I wish that there was a lighter shade or even just a translucent shade without this tint. I always prefer sort of an untinted powder anyway. I don't mind all over the face, but it does also make me wonder that there's only 3 shades. This shade light, medium, in a deep option. And the deep option doesn't look that dark, so I'm also wondering, is that going to be too light on people with deeper skin? And then even maybe with the medium shade, because they are sheer shades, but you know, usually if you're very light or very dark, things can show up more harsh on you. I think it's a pretty powder on the face. Like it performed pretty well. For me right now, for my lifestyle, this just isn't like setting enough. It's not as long wearing as I need it to be. I tried using it with more cream options, even not using the creams today. It just didn't really work as well as I needed it to. And for the price, I'm just gonna say like not worth it in my opinion. But if you do have drier skin, if you feel like things look really powdery on you, this might actually be a good option. Also, if you feel like the shade would work for you. I do also have that 20% off code with RMS, so you can get a discount off of the price. RMS does seem to innovate for more people with like drier, more mature skin, or if you just feel like makeup usually looks very makeup-y on you, like RMS is kind of that vibe where it doesn't look as much like makeup. And I think this is like an innovative skincare formula. It's just a little bit too emollient for me. So this may be more of like a normal dry skin person powder. If it sounds like something you like, maybe give it a go, but if you have a similar skin tone or skin texture or skin type to me, similar issues with your makeup, I would personally avoid it. And also, I just don't think it works well for the under eyes. So I'm just not gonna say overall it's a recommendation. I actually think I personally like the RMS Unpowder just original better, This one can be a little bit drying, but it is super oil controlling and it actually sets my under eyes as well. But yeah, it's just interesting to see how like the Hydra technology has worked its way into a new powder. I think it definitely used with some improvement. Definitely not my favorite product from RMS. Lots of other good products available from them. This would not be one of my favorites. I'd love to know what you think of this powder, if you think it would work for your skin type, or if you're like me and you're just like not gonna gel well with it. But thank you for tuning in. I hope you found it helpful, and I'm gonna pop another review or video on the screen here that YouTube thinks you're gonna enjoy. So let's see if you do. I will see you over there. Bye.